A standard, linear curriculum treats education like an assembly line. It relies on reproductive inquiry, an approach that isolates topics, feeds them to students sequentially, and freezes them into distinct blocks of memorized data. Creative inquiry demands a different mechanism. Instead of reproducing known facts, it asks students to investigate the world and themselves through broad, enduring themes. To foster this, a school requires a specific structural framework, the Program of Inquiry, or POI, a design tool for transdisciplinary planning. This framework uses a learner's prior knowledge as a baseline, then shifts them into unfamiliar modes of seeing, knowing, and doing. The Program of Inquiry is the engine for the entire International Baccalaureate mission. Without it, global-mindedness remains an abstract goal. With it, intercultural understanding and active learning are systematically woven into the daily experience of every student. Architecting this framework means building a whole school, long-term plan. It must balance subject-specific knowledge with high-level conceptual understanding. Structurally, the POI creates forced intersections, crossing standard subjects directly with transdisciplinary themes. At any intersection, teachers and students act as researchers, pulling subject-specific tools to generate new theories. The matrix requires horizontal balance across a single grade level, ensuring a coherent learning experience. It also requires vertical articulation, where units connect and escalate in complexity each year. Designing this dimensional grid is a massive logistical challenge. It requires strict adherence to IB requirements, deep strategic collaboration, and rigorous ongoing review. But this structure matters. A dynamically balanced program of inquiry prevents knowledge from siloing. It guarantees every piece of information a student learns connects to a larger, unified educational experience. Before a school can focus on creative exploration, the system must meet strict baseline compliance requirements set by the PYP. For standard grade levels, all 6 transdisciplinary themes must be addressed across the year levels, but early years learners have an exception, requiring a minimum of 4 units. 2 of those slots must always be dedicated to who we are and how we express ourselves. However, there is a caveat. If a school's learners remain in the early years program for 2 or more years, they cannot cycle through the same 4 slots. All 6 themes must be explored over that duration. These constraints are not arbitrary administrative hurdles. They force schools to lay a broad, deeply connected foundation of learning long before students reach higher grade levels. Moving from the macro requirements of the grid to the micro level of the classroom, we have to look at how a school actually designs a single unit to fit this framework. This diagram shows how a specific transdisciplinary theme is mapped out. The opening statement captures the essence of the theme and forces subject connections. The bullet points then unpack that theme, providing conceptual depth to generate alternative lines of inquiry. By utilizing these specific descriptors, teaching teams can construct the central ideas and lines of inquiry that will actually drive classroom investigation. A unit is only as strong as its conceptual anchor. If a school fails to properly unpack the theme at this structural level, the teaching inevitably slides backward into isolated, topic-based reproduction. Building this matrix requires heavy facilitation, and that responsibility falls on the PYP coordinator. They must deploy a specific strategy to organize their teaching staff and construct the grid. 3 strategies exist. First, a core group builds a skeleton framework, which is then developed by the whole staff. Second, distributed groups build units in parallel, which are later merged. Third, synchronous whole staff development builds the entire matrix together in real time. A school's choice among these 3 workflows depends entirely on its size, available resources, and realistic meeting schedules. The architectural method chosen dictates the success of the outcome. A program of inquiry constructed in isolation by a single administrator will never achieve true transdisciplinary integration when it reaches the classroom. Once the grid is built, the work is not over. The POI is a continuous operating system. At a minimum, it requires an annual refinement process. This requires a technical diagnostic scan. Coordinators check for horizontal and vertical balance, isolate redundant topics, and spot omissions in the scope and sequences. To guide this review, a reflection framework maps 4 evaluation quadrants. The top row handles operational questions: what pushes the program further, and how to execute creative approaches. The bottom row tackles logistics: when to revise and who to include for diverse perspectives. Applying this structured, rigorous review prevents curriculum stagnation. It ensures the framework adapts to shifting local contexts and dynamic learner needs year after year. Executing that whole staff review often runs into severe time constraints. To solve this, advanced schools decentralize the feedback process. Instead of limiting reviews to scheduled meetings, they make the matrix highly visible in communal spaces. Displaying the POI publicly invites direct feedback. It pulls raw observations and reflections from teachers, students, and parents navigating the system. Integrating this diverse data optimizes the POI in real time, aligning the written curriculum with the actual experience of the learning community. The ultimate goal of all IB programs is to develop internationally minded people who recognize their common humanity. Opening the program of inquiry to visible iteration anchors the curriculum in the school's local context, providing a blueprint for global citizenship.